What happens when Latinx icons stop playing by the rules and start owning every part of their power? In 2025, these 5 men didn't just break into the spotlight, they took it. With bold fashion, unapologetic energy, and music or media that speaks louder than any label, they're redefining what it means to be Latin, queer, and unstoppable. Some are out, some are beautifully ambiguous, and some are just too hot to ignore. But one thing's for sure. They've turned cultural pride, raw sex appeal, and queer-coded charisma into global obsession. From red carpets to streaming charts, they're not asking permission. They're claiming space. Which of these Latinx legends is making you rethink your type? Drop their name below and type Caliente if you believe Latin queer energy is running the world in 2025. Bad Bunny, the genderless Latinx superstar, who queered the mainstream without saying a word. You don't need to Google, "Is Bad Bunny gay?" The internet already did that for you 1,000 times over. And in 2025, that question doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, aka Bad Bunny, has become one of the most powerful queer-coded figures in pop culture. And he did it without ever asking for permission. The Puerto Rican megastar isn't just the face of Latin trap and reggaeton, he's the revolution that cracked those genres open. Known for his genre-bending sound, emotional honesty, and chaotic brilliance, Bad Bunny didn't arrive to play it safe. He arrived to change everything. Early in his career, he pushed boundaries with painted nails, skirts, and crop tops, visuals that shook the hyper-masculine world of urbano music to its core. And instead of defending those choices, he just made more. From Vogue covers in full drag to twerking in music videos in both mask and femme fits, Bad Bunny never once paused to explain. And that silence? It was louder than a label, but it wasn't just the fashion. His lyrics began to evolve. References to lovers without pronouns, lines that allowed desire to feel fluid, verses that danced between genders as freely as he danced across the stage. It wasn't just bait, it was freedom. The kind queer fans recognized instantly. When he released the video for Caro in 2019, where he literally swapped bodies with a woman and kissed a man on screen, it was clear. He wasn't just playing with visuals, he was queering the mainstream from the inside. And in 2025, that mission continues. He still hasn't labeled himself, and he still doesn't need to, because his impact is undeniable. For young queer Latinx fans, especially those navigating rigid cultural norms, Bad Bunny represents a new possibility. That you can be soft and fierce, sensual and loud, beautiful and messy, and still be the biggest star in the world. He didn't come out. He broke out of every mold people tried to fit him into. Fashion-wise, he's an icon. Whether it's rocking pastel suits at the Met Gala, showing up shirtless in a pearl harness, or pairing grills with pink fuzzy cardigans, Benito has made androgyny sexy again, and masculine softness something to aspire to. He doesn't need to say he's queer. The queer world already sees him, and in many ways, claims him. Not as a symbol of perfection, but as proof that queerness isn't always about labels. Sometimes it's about liberation. And Bad Bunny? He made it global. Think Bad Bunny is the most powerful queer-coded disruptor in Latin music history? Type Libri in the comments if you believe existing outside the box is the boldest identity of all. Francisco Lachowski, the Brazilian model who became a queer fantasy without saying a word. There are models, and then there's Francisco Lachowski. The man who redefined male beauty for an entire generation and made the queer world stop, zoom in, and whisper, he knows exactly what he's doing. In 2025, Francisco isn't just a supermodel. He's a global icon of soft masculinity, fluid fashion, and dangerously quiet queer-coded energy. From fashion runways in Paris to shirtless spreads in L'Officiel Homme, his presence doesn't shout, it seduces. Effortlessly, continuously, without a label in sight. Born in Brazil and discovered at age 17, Francisco quickly became the face and body of brands like Dior, Balmain, and DKNY. But while his chiseled features and towering frame made headlines, it was something else that made him unforgettable. The vibe. On camera, he isn't just posing, he's inviting. There's a softness in his expression, a sensuality in the way he holds his body. Whether he's styled in silk or denim, licking his lips or staring straight down the lens, Francisco gives off the kind of controlled intimacy that queer fans pick up on instinctively. He doesn't perform queerness. He allows you to imagine it. And imagine they did. For years, Francisco has been the subject of gay fantasy threads, fan edits, Tumblr deep dives, and YouTube Is He videos, and yet he said nothing. Publicly, he's a married man, a father. But that hasn't stopped LGBTQ+ fans from claiming him as their own queer-coded muse. Why? Because Francisco represents a kind of modern masculinity that doesn't fight femininity. He embraces softness. He wears lace, pearls, and pastel without irony. He models for brands that put him in skirts and sheer tops. He holds other male models with an intimacy that doesn't feel staged. It feels like possibility. And then there's the fashion. Francisco is runway royalty, but his off-duty style is just as telling. Oversized shirts, delicate jewelry, perfectly messy hair, and poses that say, "I woke up like this, knowing you'd be watching." He's never made statements about queerness, and that's part of the appeal. In a world where everyone rushes to define, Francisco simply exists. And that kind of mystery? It's gold for queer audiences, especially those who've grown up learning to read between the lines, to find meaning in every glance, wristbend, and camera angle. Francisco Lachowski may never come out. He may never clarify the vibe he so effortlessly gives. But in 2025, he's already one of the most admired queer-coded icons in fashion. Not because of what he said, but because of how he's made people feel. Think Francisco's quiet beauty hides a deeper, delicious secret? Type Softicon in the comments if you've ever seen a single photo of him and instantly said, "Yeah, us." Manuel Turizo, the reggaeton star, with a voice that's deep soft and just queer enough to obsess over. If you only listened to Manuel Turizo, you'd think he was built in a Latin pop lab. Smooth baritone vocals, sensual beats, and lyrics that melt through speakers like honey. But if you watch him, really watch, something else starts to stir beneath the surface. In 2025, Turizo isn't just another chart-topping reggaetonero. He's a queer-coded puzzle wrapped in abs, silk, and just enough ambiguity to drive the internet wild. Born in Colombia, Turizo rose to fame with hits like Una Lady Como Tu and Culpables, quickly establishing himself as a new generation Latin lover. But unlike the reggaeton stars before him, all machismo and straight boy swagger, Manuel showed up softer, smarter, sexier, in a way that didn't feel forced. His energy wasn't aggressive, it was magnetic. And then came the visuals. As his fame grew, so did his fashion, and his flirtation with fluid style. Flowy silk shirts, leather harnesses, painted nails, mesh, pearls. He began to serve looks that blurred the line between traditional masculinity and something far more inviting, and the queer fandom noticed fast. TikTok edits zoomed in on the slow glances, the casual intimacy in his music videos, the way he posed with other male artists just a little too close, the shirtless performances that felt like fan service for everyone. And while Turizo has never labeled himself and has only been linked to women publicly, there's a quiet tension in his vibe that's kept queer fans tuned in and turned on. He's not overtly political. He doesn't perform allyship and hashtags. But in a genre that has long been criticized for hypermasculinity and homophobia, his very presence feels like resistance. A man with a deep voice, a soft smile, and a wardrobe that says, "I dress for me, not your expectations." In interviews, Turizo often avoids definitive language. He talks about emotions, connection, chemistry, but never boxes himself in. And that ambiguity? It's become a language of its own. For queer fans, especially those in Latin cultures where fluidity is still whispered behind closed doors, Manuel's presence feels like permission to feel seen, without having to explain. He may not be waving a rainbow flag on stage, but in 2025, his silence says plenty, and his body of work, his styling, his gaze, all speak the same language. Curiosity, comfort, and quiet queer possibility. Manuel Turizo didn't change reggaeton by shouting. He changed it by softening it. And in doing so, he carved out space for fans who've never quite felt invited. Until now. Think Manuel's energy is too deliciously queer-coded to be coincidence? Type soft fire in the comments if he's ever made you stare at the screen a little too long. Carlos Rivera, the Mexican ballad king who sings like he's hiding something beautiful. Carlos Rivera doesn't just sing love songs. He embodies them. With a voice that sounds like a velvet sunrise and a face sculpted for novella close-ups, the Mexican pop star has spent the past decade breaking hearts across Latin America and quietly building a queer fan base that watches his every move with curious admiration. Because in 2025, Carlos isn't just a voice for romance. He's a walking, whispering, tuxedo-wrapped mystery. From humble beginnings in Huamantla, Rivera rose to fame after winning Mexico's version of American Idol. Since then, he's become a fixture on Latin radio, musical theater stages, and international red carpets. Known for emotional ballads like Recuérdame and Te Esperaba, his music is classic, polished, full of sweeping emotion and poetic yearning. And yet, for all the love he sings about, the details often feel deliberately vague. No pronouns, no hard declarations, just feeling. And for queer fans who've had to decode their emotions in silence for years, that ambiguity is more than relatable. It's magnetic. And let's talk about the aesthetic. Carlos isn't flashy. He doesn't need to be. He's elegance incarnate. Slim fit suits, perfectly styled hair, silk shirts unbuttoned just enough to imply danger. The man walks like a ballad in human form. And that old Hollywood masculine polish? It only amplifies the speculation. Because here's the thing, Carlos is almost too perfect, too poised, too controlled, too rehearsed. His interviews are graceful, his Instagram carefully curated. And while he's been publicly linked to a few women, he rarely speaks openly about his private life. The result? 1 million gay theories, and a fan base that has turned him into Latin America's softest queer-coded heartthrob. He's not overtly queer, but he's queer-friendly, sometimes queer-targeted. He shows up at Pride-adjacent events, he supports LGBTQ+ causes, he posts fan art that includes gay couples, and his Broadway background, he starred in The Lion King in Spain, only deepens the he knows suspicion. Carlos never mocks the speculation, never pushes back. He just smiles, sings, and lets the camera catch that lingering look, the kind that makes queer fans hit replay, wondering if they imagined it or if he meant it. In 2025, Carlos Rivera stands at the crossroads of tradition and transformation. He sings love the old-fashioned way. But his audience? They're reading him through a very modern, very queer lens. And that tension? It's delicious. Think Carlos Rivera is hiding a rainbow-colored heart behind that tailored suit? Type bolero in the comments if his voice has ever made you feel gay, heartbroken, and somehow grateful for it. Mau López, the bold new face of Latin queer pop you can't stop watching. If Latin pop in 2025 had a face for Gen Z rebellion, it would be Mau López. Shirt half open, nails painted, hips moving, and a smirk that says, "I know exactly what I'm doing and who I'm doing it for." Mau isn't here to fit into a box. and that's exactly why queer fans love him. Bursting out of the Mexican indie scene and into the digital spotlight, Mau López rose fast and loud. His music blends reggaeton, alt-pop, and electro beats with lyrics that are raw, playful, and drenched in flirtation. His voice is honey smooth, but the message? Spicy. Often genderless, sometimes explicit, always suggestive, and never, ever apologetic. From his very first singles, Mau made it clear. He wasn't interested in traditional machismo. He wore crop tops. He danced with men in his videos. He posted selfies with captions like, "Te gusta así o más suave?" and let the comment section spiral. He's never labeled himself. And he doesn't need to, because what he's giving, visually, musically, sexually, is already speaking fluently to his queer audience. What makes Mau stand out isn't just his fluid fashion or his unapologetic Instagram thirst traps, it's his energy. It's magnetic, playful, and just a little dangerous. He leans into the gaze. He wants you to look, and he gives you plenty to talk about. At live shows, he flirts with both sides of the crowd. He smiles at boys the same way he smiles at girls. His choreo is full of hips, chest, touch. He knows he's being read as queer, and he's not fighting it. In fact, he's feeding it. And Gen Z loves him for it. For many young LGBTQ+ fans in Latin America, a region still wrestling with visibility, tradition, and toxic masculinity, Mau López is a breath of fresh, glitter-scented air. He's the reminder that queerness doesn't have to be declared to be felt, that boldness can be a language, that teasing can be activism, and he's only just getting started. Fashion-wise, Mau pulls from genderless streetwear, bold colors, and Y2K nostalgia with a queer twist. Think pleather pants, chokers, tiny sunglasses, painted nails, mesh tops, and the occasional pearl chain over bare chest. He dresses like Bad Bunny's Gen Z cousin who went full pop star and embraced the gay gaze with open arms. Mau López isn't afraid to be sexy. He's afraid of being boring. And in 2025, nothing is more exciting than a rising star who knows his power and lets the world wonder what he'll do with it next. Think Mau López is exactly the kind of bold queer energy Latin music needs right now? Type fluido in the comments if his vibe has you blushing, bopping, and maybe questioning a few things. Latinx culture has always been bold, always been beautiful. But in 2025, it's never been this unapologetically queer. These 5 stars aren't just changing the game. They're dancing right over the rule book. Some are out, some are ambiguous, and some are just too iconic to be straight. Either way, they've shown us that Latinx identity and queer power don't compete. They amplify each other. Who gave you the most butterflies, the most questions, or the most screenshots? Drop their name below and type or gullo if you believe queer Latinx energy is leading the culture, not following it. Don't forget to subscribe to Rainbow Spotlight for more iconic faces, untold stories, and queer magic from every corner of the world.